What happens when a prince walks onto live television thinking the rules don't apply to him? In just 32 seconds, one comment would turn a friendly morning show interview into an absolute disaster that would end with security escorting a royal off the set. This is the story of how Prince Harry went from honored guest to unwelcome presence on Good Morning America, and how Michael Strahan became the hero who refused to back down. The morning started like any other at the Good Morning America studios in New York City. The crew was setting up, the lights were being adjusted, and Michael Strahan was reviewing his notes for what was supposed to be a lighthearted interview with Prince Harry. The Duke was making the rounds, promoting his latest charity initiative, and the producers thought it would be great television. Friendly conversation, some laughs, maybe a few personal stories. Easy content for a Friday morning. But the moment Prince Harry walked onto that set, something felt different. Michael noticed it right away. The prince had this look on his face, this air about him that screamed superiority. No warm handshake, no smile for the cameras, just a cold nod as he sat down in the chair across from Michael. Michael, being the professional he is, smiled wide and welcomed his guest. "Prince Harry, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We're really excited to have you here." Harry barely looked at him. He adjusted his jacket, glanced at the cameras, and gave the shortest response possible. Sure. Michael kept his composure. He dealt with difficult guests before. This was nothing he couldn't handle. "So, let's talk about your new project. You've been working with veterans, helping them transition back to civilian life. That's really meaningful work." Harry leaned back in his chair like he owned the place. "Yes, well, it's something I'm passionate about. Unlike most people who just talk about helping others, I actually do something about it." The studio went quiet for a second. Even the crew behind the cameras exchanged glances. Did he really just take a shot at everyone else? Michael's smile tightened, but he pressed forward. "That's great. I think a lot of people try to make a difference in their own ways. Everyone has their own path to giving back." Harry laughed, but it wasn't a friendly laugh. It was dismissive. "Do they? Because from where I'm sitting, most people in America are more concerned with their morning coffee than actual global issues." Michael shifted in his seat. This was getting uncomfortable fast. "Well, I don't know if that's entirely fair. Americans are generous people. They donate billions to charity every year. They volunteer in their communities." "Donate?" Harry interrupted, his voice dripping with condescension. "Writing a check isn't the same as doing real work. Anyone can throw money at a problem. It takes someone with real vision, real experience, to create actual change." The audience in the studio was dead silent now. You could feel the tension rising. Michael took a breath and decided to redirect the conversation. He was still trying to salvage this interview, still trying to be the gracious host. "Let's talk about your family. How are your kids adjusting to life in California?" Harry's face changed. He looked irritated now, like Michael had crossed some invisible line. "My children are off limits. I thought your producers would have made that clear." Michael nodded slowly. "Of course, I respect that. I'm a father too. I understand wanting to protect your kids. I was just asking how they're doing, not looking for anything invasive." "The fact that you're even bringing them up is invasive," Harry snapped back. "This is exactly the problem with American media. No boundaries, no respect. Just constant prying into people's private lives." Michael's patience was starting to wear thin, but he kept his cool. "Harry, with all due respect, you've written books about your private life. You've done interviews talking about your family. You've put yourself out there. People are naturally curious." "Curious?" Harry stood up slightly in his chair, his voice getting louder. "You mean nosy? You mean intrusive? There's a difference between sharing my story on my terms and having some television host think he has the right to ask me whatever he wants." The producers in the control room were panicking. This was live television. Millions of people were watching this unfold in real time. Michael could see the floor director making frantic hand signals, trying to figure out what to do. But Michael Strahan didn't get to where he is by backing down. He'd played professional football. He'd stared down 300-pound linemen trying to take his head off. He wasn't about to let some entitled prince push him around on his own show. "Okay, let's take a step back here," Michael said, his voice calm but firm. "I invited you on this show as a guest. I prepared questions that were respectful and relevant to why you're here. If you didn't want to talk about certain things, that's fine, but you don't get to come on my show and insult me, insult our audience, and insult an entire country." Harry's face turned red. "Excuse me? Do you know who you're talking to?" "I'm talking to a guest on my show who's being incredibly rude." Michael shot back. And yes, I know exactly who you are. But that doesn't give you the right to act like you're better than everyone else. I am better than everyone else here, Harry exploded. I'm royalty. I've served my country. I've lived a life you couldn't possibly understand. And I don't have to sit here and be lectured by some former football player who reads words off a teleprompter for a living. The gasps from the studio audience were audible. Even the crew members stopped what they were doing. Nobody could believe what they were hearing. This was a complete meltdown, happening live on national television. Michael stood up. His face was serious now, all traces of his usual friendly demeanor gone. That's enough. You need to leave. Harry laughed again, that same dismissive laugh. You're kicking me off? You can't kick me off. Do you have any idea what kind of backlash you're going to face? My lawyers will destroy you. I'll make sure you never work in television again. I said, you need to leave, Michael repeated, his voice steady and unwavering. This interview is over. You arrogant piece of trash, Harry snarled. You think you're something special because you wear a suit and smile at a camera? You're nothing. You're nobody. I could buy this entire network if I wanted to. Michael pointed toward the exit. Security. 2 security guards appeared from the side of the set. They approached Harry carefully, professionally. Sir, we need you to come with us. Harry looked around wildly, like he couldn't believe this was actually happening. You can't do this to me. I'm a prince. I'm a guest on this show. You were a guest, Michael corrected. Now you're trespassing. These gentlemen are going to escort you out of the building. This is outrageous, Harry shouted as the security guards gently but firmly took his arms. I'll sue everyone here, every single person. You'll all be hearing from my attorneys. That's your right, Michael said calmly. But right now, you need to leave. As the security guards started walking Harry toward the exit, he continued shouting, You have no idea who you're messing with, Strahan. No idea. I have connections. I have power. I'll ruin you. Michael just stood there, watching. The cameras were still rolling. The audience sat frozen, not sure if they should react or stay silent. This was unprecedented. Nobody gets kicked off Good Morning America, especially not someone like Prince Harry. Harry tried to plant his feet, tried to resist the security guards, but they were professionals. They kept moving him steadily toward the door. Get your hands off me! Do you know what the punishment is for touching royalty? This is assault. Sir, please calm down, one of the security guards said quietly. Let's not make this worse than it needs to be. Worse? Worse? Harry's voice was reaching a fever pitch now. You have no idea how bad this is going to get for all of you. I'm calling my brother. I'm calling my father. You're all finished. Michael walked back to his desk and sat down. He looked directly into the camera, addressing the audience at home. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for what you just witnessed. That is not the kind of behavior we expect from our guests, and it's not something we tolerate on this show. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue with our scheduled programming. But Harry wasn't done. Even as he was being pulled off the set, he kept yelling, You're going to regret this, Strahan. All of you. This isn't over. The studio doors closed behind him, muffling his continued protests. The audience sat in stunned silence. The crew didn't know whether to keep filming or cut away. Michael just sat there, composed, professional, waiting for the commercial break. One of the producers rushed over to Michael during the break. Are you okay? That was insane. Michael nodded. I'm fine. He crossed a line. Multiple lines, actually. Nobody talks to my audience like that. Nobody talks to America like that. He threatened to sue, the producer said nervously. Let him, Michael replied. We have everything on tape. Everyone saw what happened. He came onto this show with an attitude. He insulted our viewers, he insulted our country, and then he insulted me personally. I gave him multiple chances to course correct, and he just kept going. What was I supposed to do? The producer didn't have an answer. Because Michael was right. There was no other way this could have ended. When you invite someone onto your show and they treat you, your team, and your audience with complete disrespect, there's only one response. You show them the door. Back in the studio, the makeup artist approached Michael. That was the craziest thing I've ever seen in 20 years of doing this job. Michael smiled, finally letting himself relax a bit. Yeah, that was definitely a first for me too. You handled it perfectly though, she said. You gave him every opportunity to be civil, and he just kept escalating. What you did took guts. The floor director counted them back in. 5, 4, 3, 2, and they were live again. Michael looked into the camera with that signature smile, though there was something different in his eyes now. A steeliness that hadn't been there before. Welcome back to Good Morning America. Well, that was certainly unexpected. I want to say thank you to all of you watching at home for sticking with us through that. It's not every day we have to escort someone off the set, but when a guest becomes disrespectful and hostile, we have to take action. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Look, I don't care who you are, where you come from, or what titles you have. When you come on this show, you treat people with respect. You treat our crew with respect, you treat our audience with respect, and yes, you treat the host with respect. That's not too much to ask. That's just basic human decency. The audience started to applaud, slowly at first, then building into a standing ovation. Michael looked genuinely touched. Thank you, he said, his voice a bit softer. Thank you for that. Now, let's move on to some much more pleasant topics, shall we? The rest of the show went smoothly. Michael interviewed a chef who was teaching underprivileged kids how to cook. They did a segment on holiday decorating tips. There was a performance by a up-and-coming singer, normal morning show content. But everyone knew that wasn't what people would be talking about. During the commercial breaks, Michael's phone was blowing up. Messages from friends, colleagues, other celebrities. Everyone was weighing in on what had happened. Most of the messages were supportive, praising Michael for standing up to Harry's behavior. His co-hosts rallied around him too. You did the right thing, one of them said. That guy was completely out of line. I just wish it hadn't come to that, Michael admitted. I really wanted to have a good conversation with him. Talk about his charity work, his life, all of that. But he came in with an agenda. He wanted to make us look bad, make America look bad. I couldn't let that happen. Meanwhile, outside the studio, Harry was still causing a scene. Witnesses reported seeing him arguing with the security guards in the lobby, demanding to speak to someone in charge, threatening legal action against anyone who would listen. Eventually, his handlers managed to get him into a car and away from the building, but not before several people had recorded his tantrum on their phones. Back in the studio, as the show wrapped up, Michael addressed the incident one more time. I know this morning's interview is going to generate a lot of conversation, he said, and that's okay. But I want to make one thing clear. This wasn't about me versus him. This was about maintaining a standard of respect and decency on this show. We welcome guests from all walks of life, from all backgrounds, with all different perspectives. But we don't welcome disrespect. We don't welcome hostility. And we certainly don't welcome someone coming on our show just to tear down hardworking Americans. He looked directly into the camera again. To everyone watching, thank you for your support. Thank you for understanding why I had to do what I did. And to my team here at Good Morning America, thank you for having my back. Now, let's go enjoy our weekend. As the show's theme music played and the credits rolled, Michael stood up from the desk. The crew gave him a round of applause. He'd handled one of the most awkward, uncomfortable situations in the show's history, and he'd done it with grace and strength. The producer approached him again. The network is backing you 100%. They watched the whole thing. They said you handled it exactly right. Michael nodded, relieved. Good, because I wasn't about to apologize for standing up for myself in this show. You shouldn't have to, the producer agreed. What he said to you, about you, was completely unacceptable. The part where he called you a former football player who just reads off a teleprompter, that was disgusting. You've worked incredibly hard to get where you are. You've earned every bit of success you have. I appreciate that, Michael said. But honestly, he could have insulted me all day, and I would have kept my cool. It was when he started going after America, going after regular people just trying to live their lives, that I drew the line. That's when I knew this. The interview couldn't continue. The makeup artist came over to remove his microphone. You're going to be a hero after this, she said. People are tired of celebrities and royals looking down on them. You stood up for everyone. Michael smiled. I just did what felt right. That's all. As the studio emptied out and the crew started breaking down the set, Michael took a moment to himself. He thought about how the morning had started, how routine everything had seemed. He thought about his notes, his planned questions, the friendly conversation he'd hoped to have. And then he thought about how quickly it had all fallen apart. But he didn't regret his decision, not for a second. Because at the end of the day, Michael Strahan knew who he was. He knew what he stood for. He'd built his career on being genuine, being kind, and treating people with respect. And he expected the same in return, regardless of whether someone was a prince or a plumber. The interview that was supposed to be a simple promotional stop had turned into something much bigger. It had become a moment that defined what Good Morning America stood for, a moment that showed viewers that no amount of fame, no royal title, no threats of lawsuits would make them compromise their values. Michael gathered his things and headed for his dressing room. His phone was still buzzing with messages. He'd deal with all of that later. Right now, he just wanted a quiet moment to process everything that had happened. As he walked down the hallway, several crew members stopped him to offer their support. "That was amazing," one camera operator said. "I've been wanting someone to stand up to people like that for years." "You made us all proud," a production assistant added. Michael thanked them all, genuinely moved by their support. This wasn't just about him anymore. It had become about something larger, about respect, about dignity, about not letting anyone make you feel small, no matter who they are. In his dressing room, Michael sat down and finally let out a long breath. The adrenaline was starting to wear off. His hands were shaking slightly. As calm as he'd appeared on camera, the confrontation had affected him. It's not every day you have to kick someone off your show, especially someone as high profile as Prince Harry. But as he sat there, reflecting on everything, Michael felt a sense of peace. He'd done the right thing. He'd protected his show, his crew, and his audience. He'd stood his ground when someone tried to bully him on live television. And he'd done it all without losing his temper, without stooping to Harry's level, without compromising who he was. The door to his dressing room opened and his publicist rushed in. "Michael, we need to talk about a statement." "No statement," Michael said firmly. "What happened speaks for itself. People saw it. They can make their own judgments." "But Harry's team is already putting out statements," the publicist protested. "They're claiming you ambushed him with inappropriate questions, that you were hostile from the start." Michael laughed. "Let them say whatever they want. We have the footage. Anyone who watched knows exactly what happened. The truth doesn't need a spin campaign." His publicist nodded, understanding. "You're right. The video is already going viral. People are on your side." "I'm not worried about sides," Michael said. "I'm just glad it's over." But it wasn't really over. Not in the way that matters. Because what happened that morning on Good Morning America would be talked about for years to come. It would be studied in journalism classes as an example of how to handle a difficult guest. It would be dissected on social media, with people taking apart every word, every gesture, every moment of the confrontation. For Michael Strahan, it would become one of the defining moments of his broadcasting career. Not because he wanted the attention or sought out the controversy, but because when the moment came, when he was faced with someone trying to diminish him and everything he'd worked for, he stood tall. He didn't back down. He didn't apologize for setting boundaries. He simply said, "Enough is enough." And that's what made him the hero of this story. Not because he was perfect, not because he handled every second flawlessly, but because he understood something fundamental. He understood that respect is a two-way street. He understood that no title, no amount of fame, no royal bloodline gives someone the right to treat others poorly. He understood that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to accept unacceptable behavior. As the afternoon wore on and Michael finally left the studio, he felt different, lighter somehow. He'd faced down something difficult and came out the other side with his integrity intact. He'd shown millions of viewers that you don't have to accept disrespect, even from someone who thinks they're untouchable. The security guard at the exit nodded to him. "Good job today, Mr. Strahan." Michael smiled. "Thank you. Just another day at the office, right?" They both laughed, knowing it was anything but just another day. Michael stepped out into the New York morning, the sun shining bright, the city buzzing with energy. Somewhere across town, Prince Harry was probably still fuming, still making threats, still convinced he was the victim in all of this. But that didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that Michael Strahan had done his job. He'd been a good host until it became impossible to be a good host anymore. He'd given his guest every opportunity to course correct. And when those opportunities were thrown back in his face with insults and condescension, he'd made the tough call. He'd shown the prince the door. And in doing so, he'd shown everyone watching that dignity isn't about titles or bloodlines. It's about how you treat people. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable. It's about knowing your worth and not letting anyone make you question it. That's why Michael Strahan won that morning. Not because he kicked someone off his show, but because he refused to let someone diminish him or his audience. He stood firm in who he was, and in doing so, He reminded everyone watching that they should do the same.